Hello, I'm so excited that this is another episode of the Vibe Coding with Steve and Gene podcast. And I'm Gene.
And I'm Steve.
The goal is to share with you all the amazing things we learned while writing the Vibe Coding book, which is coming out on October 21st. And I think it's such an amazing book, and it shows how and why developers should be integrating AI into every part of their work to make their lives easier and more fun. And so the goal is to record a couple of these a week and share all the adventures and things that we're learning. And Steve, last episode, you had shared your amazing Freet thing for Emacs, which I just learned. A Freet, the definition is it is a what is the definition of a Freet? It's like this underworld demon with a great power.
Yeah, I just learned that you didn't play Dungeons and Dragons as a kid. Yes, the Ifrit was actually on the cover of the Dungeon Master's Guide in the early Advanced Dungeons and Dragons.
I read those books
And
cover to cover. Yeah, I guess I never actually said the words out loud.
yeah, there's a lot of different spellings, and so I took one that was like semi-standard and matches Emacs's spelling better. So it was a nice fit. But yeah, the implication is that they can grant wishes, or they can have great power, they can be great allies. But by the same token, they're somewhat mercurial, and they have their own agendas sometimes, and also it's really hard to find a not taken name these days. But yeah, Ifrit, I've got big plans for it. That was a really fun episode, show and tell. We want to do more show and tells, because what we're finding is that as we like talk through the stuff that we're building, we can share the latest and greatest in the tools and the techniques and the insights, and also the sort of problems that we run into and how we get out of them, the problem solving techniques.
Yeah, love it, love it. In fact, there's actually a couple things that I would love to show you in terms of one is the Markdown parser, the stuff that helped us finish the book in the last 4 days of the book writing process. But Steve, I had just been gushing to you about like how I finished something we put into the section called impossible things to do, which mostly I've done by now, but there was one that I've been wanting to do for like years, which is like upgrade my MySQL instance from MySQL 5 to MySQL 8, which I've been deferring for years.
And
And
this
I
is a Google Cloud SQL
Google
instance.
Cloud SQL, yeah, I logged in and I saw this little banner at the top that said, "Do you know that you're paying extra money every month because it's end of life?" I'm like, whoa. It just generated a reaction like, you know what? Today's a good day to take that open
Take
item
all of
and
my
see what you can get
websites
done.
down simultaneously.
So I gotta tell you, it was a pretty awesome experience until about 2 nights ago, when it was probably one of the more terrifying moments I've had. It reminded me of like when you drop a production table because you're in the wrong window and you realize that you must have destroyed something and you're in way over your head.
So this database has what in it?
Yeah, I use it for everything. I think it's been around for 12, 13 years. I have all my tweet history scraped from Twitter, from a whole bunch of sources. I resurrected that pipeline, vibe coded that after Twitter changed their API policies. All the book ranking information that goes back 15 years. I have like every database I have is in that one instance. So like it is a pretty mission critical piece of infrastructure for me. It's not revenue generating. Basically, everything personal that I have in a database, it's in there.
And you have some applications using it also and displaying it, right?
Oh yeah, no, totally. Yes, it's that was an exercise in and of itself. But luckily, I had everything in Google Secrets Manager. So when the day came to switch the instance name, that would be pretty simple. That would all switch over. Yeah. So it was pretty. I did by hand. I manually made a new sequence and I did a couple experiments to figure out. It turns out because of these big JSON blobs I have, migrated a lot of stuff from MongoDB into MySQL because I kept on hitting the quota and I had to keep deleting the data. And I'm like, screw that. I'm just going to put that into MySQL, just get it off of MongoDB. Because of that, the MySQL export stopped working. Like every time I tried to back up the database, it would fail. I spent a couple of hours I cloned the instance, I upgraded it in place, right? That worked. And the next step was I had to upgrade a bunch of queries. A bunch of queries started failing. It turns out MySQL 8 rank is now a reserved keyword. And I have column names ranked all over the place. So I had to change that. I vibe coded and upgraded that, in the application. The real big problem was the JSON queries are quite different. So in MySQL 5,
From
there were,
MySQL 5 to 8.
yeah, exactly. So in MySQL 5, it was pretty ugly, but I didn't care. I didn't want to pay more for my MongoDB costs. Didn't really understand them. And that had to change. So that took a couple hours. But again, Cloud Code was able to help upgrade my tests. Finally got those working. And Steve, I know you have a bunch of stuff that might be in MySQL 5. I have to tell you, the JSON operations in MySQL 8 are pretty freaking amazing. it can actually project every row in a table that has JSON in it. You can do a query on the aggregate of that, and it's really fast. There are like pretty surprising things you can do with JSON queries inside of MySQL 8. It's not as pretty as MongoDB, which is everything's naturally a JSON document, but it is pretty amazing. I think the MySQL people did great stuff with the JSON in MySQL 8.
I definitely have semi-structured hierarchical data right for my game, and I've been interested in switching from relational plus XML, which is what I have now, to use either MongoDB or use JSON in MySQL.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like you've got experience with both of them. So what is it that you're missing from MongoDB that that you're okay with losing by switching to JSON and MySQL?
Yeah, MySQL, I find like MongoDB queries to be really quite beautiful, right? It's just a natural, especially in Clojure, right? Basically, you just pass it these data structures that the queries just look really nice. You can do aggregation, you can just do selects, slicing, summing. And in MySQL 8 and 5, it looks like it's all SQL strings that are like incomprehensible. It's just, they are, thank goodness for vibe coding, because I could have never written those queries, but they're fast. So if you really like comprehensible queries, there's a lot to be said about MongoDB, especially if you can use like not English strings, but you can actually use kind of data structures. The MySQL treatment of that is pretty ugly.
Okay, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. So MySQL is pretty powerful. It's retrofitted on because it wasn't designed for JSON.
Yeah. And it was surprised that some parts were actually faster than MongoDB, which really surprised me. I would say that was pretty great, but I did hit a big pothole that actually scared the crap out of me.
Yeah, so you ran into a disaster, right?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, let me share my screen.
And this was like what, 3 days ago?
3 days ago, yeah. So as at 7 p.m., I decide I'm going to do the last step. I have just one last step in the migration, and that is these Looker Studios. So, Steve, we've seen this graph. We create these graphs to based on information scraped from Amazon, so you can see sales rank, and so we can actually see kind of are we hitting our launch goals and so forth. So I start the Google Looker Studio migration, of which I know almost nothing about. Someone wrote this for us 6 years ago, and he's since left the business. And by 10:30, here's what it looks like. There are 3 significant errors all showing up at the same time. User configuration errors, chart errors. There was actually a system error, these really cryptic codes. And this was terrible. Just to walk backwards a step, I had actually pointed the Looker Studio connectors to the new database. That worked, but it was authenticating, but it wasn't getting data. So I used the Cloud Code to actually compare the 2 instances using the gcloud command line. Tell me what's different. The suggestions, for the most part, I rejected, but there was one suggestion made that said, hey, you can't use you're using the legacy authentication. You're using MySQL native password authentication, not caching SHA-2 password. And so I don't know about you, Steve, but I hate making new MySQL accounts. I typically screw them up. I usually screw up the access granting stuff, but an hour later, that turns out to be the winning answer. I get that working.
You used Cloud MCP to do that, huh?
Yes, I did. I used Claude MCP to actually make the account for me, because I wanted to have the machine do it, not me, just because I've screwed it up massively in the past.
Even knowing that the machines tend to screw things up too.
Yes, because I could review. It's only making one insert, and I can actually see the insert, and I can delete the row if it screwed it up. So that felt to me better than me doing it by hand.
Got it.
Yeah.
Also, everything went blank, and then what?
Yeah. So actually, at this point, Steve, I'm panicking.
You weren't going to be able to roll back. You had already basically brought up the new database, right?
Yes, and Looker Studio version
Could
controls.
you have done this like by setting up a whole parallel staging environment?
I could. Yeah. The problem wasn't the database, it was the dashboard. So they version control like all the visual elements here, but the connectors are not version controlled. And I've seriously screwed them up. Like they're no longer retrieving data. So Looker no longer has any values to display. As I was mentioning to you, Steve, like when this happened, I was panicking because I had turned this working dashboard into a pile of rubble. There's no source code for this. There's no version history for it. And I don't even know how it works. There's things called like dimensions and metrics. And I really honestly didn't know what those were. I just had a
So
very
you
vague
had
idea.
the dashboard code somewhere, but it was in some proprietary builder studio thing.
Exactly. Exactly. And Steve, you had mentioned that this level of panic, you can imagine many enterprises getting into as they're doing this type of activity, right? This is not impossible to imagine.
Yeah, look, we make the point over and over again in our book that you can be more ambitious, right? And that you should be more ambitious, and that vibe coding encourages you to be more ambitious. But that's just going to come with bigger failures too, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I see what happened to you or what happened to me a week ago or whatever. Any of the sort of day-to-day production issues you can get into with vibe coding as being little microcosms, samples of what's going to happen at a bigger scale with companies. And that's why I asked about the staging environment, right? If you're going to do this, if you're going to be serious about it, you're not going to, you failed right out of the starting gate
No, that's
by
right.
setting it up in a way that you were going to have to. What did you do? You were supposed to use your superior judgment, and instead you wound up having to use your superior skill to
That's
get.
right. That's right. The famous quote by the pilot, right? The test pilot. Yeah. So my mistake was I should have cloned this report and I should have cloned the connector. Instead, I started making changes to the connector and I blew that up. And I also consequently blew up Looker Studio. So I love that metaphor. This is like when I imagine what it feels like if you're flying a commercial airliner or a jet in the air, and then all the displays go out. and you have no one but yourself. That's the way I felt. So
What did you do?
what did I do? Yeah, I was panicking just because unlike dropping a production table, I feel like I would know what to do, right? But here it's like I didn't even understand how Looker worked. And I didn't understand how the connectors worked. I didn't understand how the graphs worked. And I remember Paige Bailey from Google. She described how you can share your screen with Gemini. If you go to Google AI Studio, if you go to Stream, you can share your screen, which is what I did. And the audio is not going to be great here, but I'm going to see if Gemini stand by while I show you some bitmaps. Bitmap generate tab on the left-hand side. Gemini, here is a screenshot of a Google Looker Data Studio dashboard. Just how much trouble am I in? Can you diagnose what's happening? Issues with the chart dashboard shows user configuration error and chart configuration incomplete for several sections. The connections and make sure the charts are set up correctly with the right dimensions and metrics. And here is a connection screen. Can you describe what might be going wrong? Shows a list of things, but some of them seem to have an error icon and reconnect. This means there's a problem with the connection to those specific data sources. You'll need to reconnect them to get the dashboard working properly.
So the audio didn't come through super clearly. So can you paraphrase what she said?
Oh yeah, so it said, hey, you noticed that we're in a Looker Studio screen. It was characterizing the types of errors, and it correctly recognized the data connector screen and was actually making some observations. And so, Steve, what was incredible to me was that over the next 2 hours, I took that giant pile of problems, right, that was causing me like borderline panic, and it helped me understand what the connectors were. How do you actually enable them again, right? They're all grayed out, right? So I could actually get them, at least the displays in the cockpit showing up again.
And this was all through interacting with Gemini Live like that, right? Stream.
Totally. I'm like even asking, right, why is it grayed out? And then once it was retrieving the data, then how do I actually help me understand how time functions are dealt with and why is it that apparently everyone turns them into strings first, and then there's a whole bunch of functions to turn those date strings into kind of other strings so you can do binning on. And then it explained to me how those values actually show up inside of Looker. It explained to me what the difference is between a dimension and a metric.
It's interesting that we our podcast often advocates using coding agents to solve problems. But in this case, you were explicitly not using a coding agent, right? You're using a conversation with Gemini. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And in this post that I made, I mentioned that it was not only it didn't strike me as a Looker expert. It knew about it and knew it couldn't tell me exactly where to find certain things, but it served as this amazing like rubber duck they talk about in programming, how often even talking to a rubber duck is helpful. Having a rubber duck in the middle of a panic inducing situation was so valuable because this rubber duck talks back, knows something about the infrastructure. Actually, I found it to be like reassuring.
Yes. Reassuring to have, like when you showed Gemini the first screen and Gemini said, "Boy, you really are screwed." You're like, "Oh, somebody gets it." Yeah. No, but how long? So it took you what, 3 hours to get out of the hole?
Yeah, a little bit of short of 2 hours. I remember going to bed at 1:45 a.m., utterly exhausted, but relieved.
And your Looker dashboard was back up again.
And the Looker board was back up. Yeah, totally. So learned a lot. In fact, I'm actually going to probably make a couple more, potentially some more dashboards now that I know how to do it. It's like it was so helpful. Like one of the things you do, like when you can't get any charts to work, you want to confirm that the data actually is there, right? So for the first time, I was actually able to just do a table display. Just like, show me what the rows are. Show me what you think the values are, right? Some of them, when they were null, I'm like, okay, there's something wrong with the connector. They show up as strings, but it should be dates. All right, there's something wrong with the conversion function. It was so good, Steve.
All right, so let's talk about within the context of our book, what are some of the things that you could have done to prevent these problems? And then let's talk again about some of the things you did to detect and correct.
Yeah, I love it. I love your quote about never get into a situation where you have to rely on superior skill. Use your superior judgment to make sure that you don't get into those situations. For me, I think the I was too cavalier in assuming that I could get it right the first time. I was confident after like finally getting the authentication to work. I thought I was just a couple clicks away, and I should have, as I mentioned, cloned the whole report and I should have cloned the connectors so that no matter how badly I screwed up, I could always go back. Luckily, I had the old version of the MySQL database and I had an old version of the report, so I could actually see what they looked like. But apparently, like MySQL 5 and MySQL 8 are different enough where that was not enough to help me. And I actually had to understand Looker better.
Yeah. Okay. So just in general, when you're going to tackle a problem like this with AI's help, which we call that vibe coding, whether the AI does the work or whether it's telling you what to type and you do the work, those are still both vibe coding, right? You would agree
Yep.
with that, Gene? And in this case, this is a project. Even though it's a thing that you probably could do in one shot, the chances of it not the fact that it's got a maybe a low two-digit probability of not working in one means you should come up with a plan instead. There's always an intermediate step, which is the plan. It's the artifact of saying, okay, what are the changes we're going to make? And part of that plan involves what things do we need to back up? What things do we need to understand that are going to change, etc. And it sounds like you pulled a Steve, because I did the same thing like the day before you. And it's just screw it. Claude's smart. I feel like there's like a learning there for our audience, right? Which is
Yeah. In
you
fact, no,
just
we talked
finished a
about
book on vibe coding doesn't mean you have great judgment about like when things are going to work and when they're not.
Yeah, we talked last episode about my friend, the VP of architecture at a large financial services firm, and I've learned a little bit more about what he's working on. It turns out that there's a Neo4j database of all of the applications, the components they depend upon, the libraries, the DLLs, etc.
That's a
Right?
popular graph database for those of you who
Oh,
don't know.
thank you. Yeah. And he rewrote the whole thing, not the whole thing. The database stayed the same, all the ingestion stuff stayed the same, but the reporting tool he rewrote from scratch. And it's amazing. When he showed it to me, I was like, man, that could have been a commercial tool. So that was the tool that his team said would take 6 to 8 months to do. That's 8 engineers, one UX person. So yeah,
This is
like
every team's nightmare. They tell the boss it's going to take 6 months to do something. The boss comes back and says, I vibe coded it over the weekend.
and it's going into production, right?
It
Because and
is,
I
right? Like the crazy thing that I was really impressed with the way you characterized it when you told me the story earlier, Gene, which was that this is a death knell for SaaS vendors, right? It's a very early warning sign, but SaaS vendors need to worry because we're seeing a trend now, a pattern where people are getting fed up with their SaaS, their software as a service, right? Their paid commercial third-party software that helps run some part of their business. And they're like, screw it. The software doesn't work the way I want, and my vendor never listens to me. I'm going to make the software. And they're doing it. And that's kind of
Hmm.
what happened here, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, it was homegrown. And I think,
Well, okay, sure. In this particular case, it
but I
could
would say looking at what my friend built, that could have been a SaaS vendor, like charging a ton of money for that. And so the internal constituencies are him, and now it's his boss. Now it's the information security people. There are going to be so many more users of the product within that large financial organization. So that's incredible. The reason why I brought that up is that it was only reading data from the database, Neo4j. I think if it were writing data into it, like suddenly you could get into a situation where you were like what I was in a couple days ago, where you
yeah.
risk corrupting important data. So if that's a possibility, I think now you have to
I
summon
mean,
the
I
best
would say
judgment.
the golden rule here that's emerging is we know Git is your backstop. We know you have to have version control for anything that resembles code, anything that's text. And you, like both of us made this mistake in the same week. Is you cannot like basically operate, you can't allow the AI to make any sort of decisions, even if it says it's going to do all the right things, even if it has a plan that involve something that isn't backed up, that's something
Yeah,
that's not restorable from Git or from a database table backup or for whatever it is, right? So that's the first rule is everything has to be idempotent. You have to like if you want to explore optionality, if you want to have your AI do stuff for you, blast it all out. Just make sure that they're cattle and not pets, right? That you can recreate that environment over and over again without having destroyed your canonical pure one that your customers are using.
yeah. And so I was guilty of supreme overconfidence, especially when I knew it was very cognizant of. I did not know how Looker Studio worked, and yet I went in and started making connector changes and chart changes, which given that I should have been exercising a lot better judgment, which included cloning everything, backing everything up, data.
In
But
both of our cases, like we were the main people affected. It wasn't like we had like thousands of users. But by the same token, these were production systems that have been running for years, and there were users for them. And so I'm wondering, like, was it the scope of it and the fact that only we would be like really screwed over if we screwed it up that allowed it that let us think wrongly like that? You know what I mean? Like, how did we, like seasoned
yeah,
professionals, make these mistakes and just be like, YOLO, we YOLO'd it? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that it's super tempting, especially if you're getting a lot of scores and successes and victories with coding. It's very easy to turn over to production and go, oh, it's going to work there too. And I think that the takeaway that we're coming away with really quickly is no, you probably don't want agents actually actively making changes in production. You want to use the
yeah.
model with a chat, where
Yeah,
you
in fact, and for me, it was not even, yeah, it was me clicking around. And I agree with your conclusion, Steve. In fact, I was having another conversation this morning with another executive who was having the time of his life vibe coding let's call it almost like a replacement for ERP systems where everything's version controlled and he wants to create very specific schemas so that he can write these reports in code. It's just awesome. And he was describing to me how literally last weekend he was having so much fun. He was so amazed at what he could do. And he too managed to delete his entire repo because of exactly what you said. It's like when you are racking up win after win, hour after hour, man, at a certain point, I think the biases start skewing towards I can do anything. And then that's what
you
caused
start
me
to get all these gamblers fallacies. Like I'm on a roll.
on a roll. That's right. There's a book called The Hot Hand, which is all
Yeah,
about
and there's no freaking hot hand in AI. That's the thing, is at any moment, like it doesn't matter how good it did the last 8 times or last 80 times. The
yeah,
next one could be the one where it suddenly decides to do the dumbest of all possible options.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I think the enduring lesson that's been etched in my head is when you don't have rollback, when you don't have undo, like in Looker, man, you better be exercising every possible fallback mechanism that you can create because it's not going to give it to you.
There's a lesson for the Looker team at Google here too. Can you guess what it is, Looker team? It rhymes with version control. I can't believe they would like not version those things. Come on, man. They have big tables. Big table has built-in versioning. They could just like by default take that versioning and let Gene go back and get his poor dead Looker query back. But no,
Right, right.
Anyway, and
Dashboards
that's
have version
lessons people are
control. The
picking.
connectors do not, and that was a tough lesson.
Yeah.
So yeah, and the other lesson is, man, if you get into trouble, man, open up Google Gemini and share your screen. And because in kind of high stakes consequential scenarios, having a co-pilot, someone looking over your shoulder, and if it knows more about the domain than you do, it is so great. And it was kind of a sort of a moderating function to help me slow down. And it gave me so much more confidence to actually start solving the problem, making changes, knowing that if I screw it up, do it in a way that I actually have a way to go back. And frankly, it was always so screwed up. Anything was better.
You switched into a new mode. You switched out of the vibe coding, like running at full speed mode, which we love to be in that mode, but you deliberately stepped out of it and pushed it all aside. Probably went back to single tasking, didn't worry about any other projects for that period, right?
Yep.
And you slowed it down almost like a debugger would slow things down. You single stepped your way through the solution rather than letting the AI go and do it for you. You were very hands on, and at every step, you would ask Gemini. I know it didn't come through when you were doing the recording earlier because we haven't got the sound hooked up, but basically you were having a conversation with Gemini saying, okay, what's next and why, and tell me more about it. And once you felt like you understood it and what was supposed to happen, you would do that step and then move to the next one. And that process, I don't even know if we have a name for it, but that slowing down is a mode that it's a little painful to get into because it feels like you're going slow now and you're thinking at a lower level of abstraction and it's not as fun and right. But you have to train yourself to get back into that mode to get yourself back on track because otherwise you're going to fishtail and vibe code your way into a wasteland.
I love that. In fact, in the Wiring the Winning Organization book that what I wrote with Dr. Stephen Spear, we call that slowification.
Slowification. So there is a
Slow,
word for it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I mean, and it really is kind of like the Kahneman-Tversky model of you go from, is it system one that's fast and system two is slow? System one is all routines and habits and instinct.
Right. So we're saying kick in your system two, right?
Kicking system two, right?
Go
And then
read Thinking Fast and Slow. What an amazing book.
it is, I've read most of it. It is brilliant. But
Yeah.
you know what, just on reflection, right? What I did in system two was actually task decompositions. Okay, in order to get things working again, I just started walking through the pieces of the system that I knew and then I tried to get educated on that and I did those 8, 10 things, which involved probably 60 steps of
I
things
have
I
a
tried.
queue of these. I have a queue of slowification sessions that I have queued up. I don't think I've ever told you this before, so everyone's hearing this live, right? But I'm accumulating them, and it's because they're not as fun as vibe coding. They're like, like one of them is, okay, I got an argument with an AI and a colleague over whether this bug was properly fixed, and so I'm going to have to go in and truly understand the entire situation and all the edge cases. It's an exploit, players can, right? And so it's in the queue. It's like I'm going to have to stop when I in my next vibe coding session, I'm gonna have to put aside the fun stuff, which is having 4 agents running and building amazing things, and I'm gonna have to go and debug this one agent in slowified mode, and I'm not
Yeah.
looking forward to it. And I have another one queued up behind that with my Flutter client because there's an issue going on there. And usually, ideally, what you want is you just describe the end state, and you have an agent that's going and telling your agents what to do. We're just not there yet, and so I wind up with this queue of grunge work that's almost what it really is. It's I'm reverting back to old-fashioned coding. I have to make it is system two. I have to make my brain work. I have to think hard. I can't really rely on the AI because that's what got me into the situation. And I can tell you, it's really uncomfortable going back to that way of coding. You have to it's going to the gym. It's like you have to be disciplined about it. I don't know if I'm making any sense at all,
No,
but
no, totally. In fact, there's another activity that I would slot in that. It's like when you're talking about architectural choices or how do I partition the system? Like when I had my haunted code bases and like how do I carve out one piece of system so I can isolate it from the other pieces and start testing. Yeah, I find those actually rewarding, right? Because but in the Looker situation, it didn't have that sort of panic, right? It's
yeah,
like,
it's not fun to do that under time pressure
that's right.
for sure.
And by the way, it was one of those situations, that situation I was in 2 nights ago was like, I was afraid if I went to sleep, I would forget everything. So I felt like I had to keep going. It's not something I could have slept on that I felt like, and I'm not sure if that's valid or not.
You were worried you were going to get a context window compact the next day. Mhm.
That's right. That last thread that could have led to salvaging the database, I lost because I decided to sleep instead. But yeah, I totally agree with you. It is very two distinct modes of thinking, and the first can be exhilarating, and the second one,
I think honestly, people think that the exhilarating one is the That's it. You go into vibe coding and you're doing it now, and then like you never have to go back or whatever. And it's actually flipping back and forth between those two modes. It's context switching, but it's almost more intense than regular context switching because you're going from very fast paced, lots of high level management to, oh
Yeah.
God, I've got to go and fix some code myself with my own hands.
Yeah.
And those are just so different on the abstraction ladder that it's exhausting, right? And
Yeah.
so I think people don't want to do it, and they don't want to think that, right? It's we're saying, look, you can not really fly, but you can hoverboard. But the thing is, it crashes every 50 feet and you got to run, and it's a lot of exercise. I think people are looking at it that way. I don't know how we're going to get that across to people, but we both went through that. That's what we're telling you in this podcast is we both had experiences in the last 7 days where we had to basically throw vibe coding out the window and go back to what we were calling vibe coding before February, right? Which is really detailed pair programming with an AI
Yeah.
in slow motion to make sure
Yeah.
that you understand everything that's happening.
And
So,
my overwhelming feeling was relief and gratitude. If it
yeah,
weren't for Gemini, even though I had a friend who had these skills, I couldn't call them at midnight. I have to wait till next day. And maybe they would be free, maybe not. These are tools that everybody should be using, especially like when you are in over your skis or whatever that metaphor is. Like when you are in over your head, it can be a lifesaver.
cool. All right. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, and Steve, I do want to say the MySQL 5 to MySQL 8 migration is now complete. It took,
Congrats.
aside from that little episode, it took me, say, 3.5 hours, and I had deferred that for,
Yeah. And that was on the impossibles list.
it was on an impossible list. So I'm down to only a couple left. Super exciting. Very FAFO.
Yeah, and look, train wrecks are part of life, right? When you're coding faster, if you're having train wrecks at the same rate, you're going to have a lot more train wrecks. But yeah, as experienced five coders, you and I probably, I'm a little shocked that we have so many war stories every week. So we're still
Yeah.
figuring it out.
So faster, yes, more ambitious. I'm so happy I finally did this. It was one of the impossible. And I love what you said is part of learning is to do things slightly outside of your current abilities. And that is very rewarding, but also sometimes poses some new dangers. Steve, you had a pretty profound way of characterizing what the lesson of this story really is.
Yeah, so like both of us did something really similar, right? Which was after a long successful run of vibe coding on a bunch of projects, right? We both attempted a sort of YOLO situation where we thought we're good at this and we've got a rapport with the machine and whatever that means. We didn't. Okay, it's an illusion. I believe that we thought we were building up trust with the AI when what we really were building up was experience. Okay, you and I were learning how to get the right prompts in, do more with less with your prompting, get the right plans in place and to-dos to keep the thing on the rails. And we thought over time, it's very easy to start thinking that it means that it understands you. Maybe even as OpenAI and companies add memory, and so that it actually gets is this sort of it has this feeling that it understands you because it remembers past interactions. And what happens is you start trusting it, and that is a huge mistake. And I actually have even used the words, I think even in our book, that as I build trust with this thing, right? But what I shouldn't be building trust in the machine. You can never trust it because at any given time, it's completely random and it may choose to do the stupidest possible thing of all the things
Right.
it could do. It may make the stupidest choice, even after what Gene and I were talking about, which was the hot hand approach effect, which is you've had 80 successes with this thing and you're on a roll, right? But that's not the way it works. The way it works is on any given invocation of this thing, it could have the worst outcome. And that
Yeah.
means that you can't pull that lever unless you have a backup plan. The backup plan is either a Git checkpoint that you can roll back to quickly, or a database backup that you can quickly put back into play, or something so that you can put it back to the way it was. Because there is no matter, and this is the takeaway: is you're building fake trust if
That's
you're
right.
building trust in this machine. Okay, don't build
Right.
trust. Always
You're
make sure
merely building
you have secure
experience.
backup. You're building experience.
Yeah. That's awesome. Oh, fantastic. Let's wrap up this episode. This is fantastic and fun. Yeah. Part one, why Bitcoin matters. Part two is theory and first steps. Part three is tools and practices, which we talked about a lot this time. And then part four is going big. Steve, another great episode, and I'll catch you next time.
All right, see you next time, Gene.